Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about kind of a hot topic of sorts, and that is recasting characters in books or movies, or books going to movies, or comics going to movies, and the discussion all around that. And I hope that we can have a sort of constructive discussion, a thoughtful discussion, because it goes around a lot. We see it a lot. We saw it in the newer version of Lord of the Rings. We saw it a couple of years ago in 007, where they took 007 from being a white male to being a black woman. We saw it in the recent Little Mermaid, where it was a ginger going into a black. And then there was also that character in that Marvel movie that used to be a Taiwanese male master of things, but they turned him into a woman that was not Taiwanese because that would have offended the Chinese market. So it happens a lot. These are just a couple of examples, and I'm sure that you could come up with more where characters were swapped from what they were originally to what they became as movie characters. So I would like to have a discussion about those things. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. Number one way to be featured is through Lamoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt. You write a short story that features that prompt idea or as a fragment. And then on the first Monday video of the month, we read some of those stories together and bask in the creativity of this community. The second way to be featured is if you're an indie author and you have a book out or a book coming out or a gaggle of books, just submit the first chapter and the cover and they'll be read here on the channel at a random interval. Always a Monday video. That's not the first Monday. And hopefully that'll help more readers find your work. The third thing is if you would like to check out any of my books, there are links down in the description below right now. You can get the books wherever you enjoy getting books from, including the library upon requests. So I hope you check them out. Enjoy. The third Bodymore book comes out this October and ARCs should be coming soon. I should have a community post up if you're interested in getting an ARC, digital ARC at the moment. So yes. With that said, let's get into the topic of recasting. Although I do have a question to pose before we get into the topic, which is if an agent or publisher came to you tomorrow and said that they would publish your book with a $15,000 advanced, but you had to change the demographics of your major characters, i.e. your white male main character would need to become a black female, your main character's side character would need to become visibly gay, like you would have to majorly change these characters, would you take that deal to be published and change those characters? Now, obviously, there are a lot of reasons why somebody might change their characters, or the characters might change going from one version, i.e. a book, into a movie. One of the reasons might be because you're worried about being judged. In this current climate especially, I don't know, I can't judge 100 years ago climate, but in current climate, whether I'm talking about ALA books that focus a lot on sex or gender or race, or I'm talking about right-wing created books like Shadow of the Conqueror or Will Jordan's books, I get a lot of people assuming what my political backgrounds are. Even last week when I just brought up the Bible being challenged as being in schools, people were assuming that I was bringing it up because I thought it was wrong. When even in the video, I said, hey, if you've got a problem, fair game, make your claim, and then it will be reviewed like any other book. However, people want to assume what your background is already, or where you're coming from, or that there is a motive behind every single thing that you're doing. I will say I have opinions. I obviously have opinions, and I'm going to get into my opinions in this video, as well as presenting the ideas to hopefully have a conversation, because we can also have differences of opinions without being enemies, without trying to tell somebody else that they're stupid. I am already by default an idiot, so you're welcome for putting you on top always. But there are people who are worried about being judged, like their casts are mostly white and they're worried that somebody will notice that their cast is mostly white and then question it, or they'll notice that there's only one gay person in the cast, or there are no gay people in the cast, and now somebody is going to go and make a claim of some sort of ism or phobia, when really you just didn't put any thought into that, and or none of your characters ended up being that way because you're kind of a character writer, so you just write what comes to you and that's what came to you. But there is a lot of fear that comes out that is just worry about what people will think about the genetic makeup of the cast. And so they want to avoid that by making sure that there's the proper percentages to hopefully avoid being judged by certain people on the internet that will make assumptions based off of the genetic makeup of your cast. People may also change demographics of their characters due to peer pressure and fear of that judgment, because you're told constantly that if you're not certain demographic, then you shouldn't write character that is certain demographic, or at least don't make them the focal point of your story. Laughs in Katsuo. Or that it is more trendy to make certain demographics the main characters right now. Another reason why the cast might change going from book or comic to movie or television is because you want to try another version, another vision, another creative, artistic vision. There are so many, if you think about Cinderella, there are so many different versions of Cinderella, and there are just all kinds of ways of doing it. You can take just the essence of the story. Same with Shakespeare, is you can do the Shakespeare plays pretty much with anyone and anything and still tell the story. I think my first introduction to colorblind casting was with the Cinderella with Brandy in it that came out in the 90s or the early 2000s. And that's a very community theater style version of casting, because when you're in the theater, all that you really have to choose for your characters and for your actors is whoever shows up to auditions. And often you want to go with the skills, generally more often you want to go with the skill set, which is limited to only the community members that appeared. And you're not going to go with maybe those two people look the same. Now, sometimes you will care more about making characters look the same, especially if it's a smaller role, so you're not so concerned about the delivery. But a lot of the time, theaters care more about the skill set than the demographics. So they'll just put whoever delivers the most compelling version, or they think would be the best version of that character. And that's a totally legitimate way to write a story. You could also take Cinderella and place it in, feudal Japan, and then that's going to change the demographics. Or you could put it in Koreatown and San Francisco and just change everything to give it a different idea behind it. And so you want a different creative vision. There is also for the monetary gain, which is what was sort of presented at the top of this video, where an agent or an opportunity comes to you and says, hey, I will pay you, but you have to change the demographics. And you're like, you know what? I will take that deal. I don't give a shit about this character. I'll just write another one. And then another reason might be for social points. And this gets into the idea of more what happened with Neil Gaiman and the Sandman as it appears. Now, I'm not anything to do with Neil Gaiman. I'm not a huge fan of Neil Gaiman. He's got some works that are okay, but mostly I think they're just not for me. But I do vaguely remember when the Neil Gaiman stuff with Sandman and Twitter and Netflix was going on, and there were a lot of people that were very disappointed with the casting for Sandman because they wanted to see characters in the show that reflected what they'd seen in the comics. And often when this happens, we saw it with 007, we saw it with The Little Mermaid, we see it every time characters change, is accusations of some sort of ism or phobia, instead of acknowledging that these were fans that just wanted to see what they'd gotten used to, what their beloved characters looked like in a live action instead of changing it. Now, I'm a kind of person that is really, really terrible with change. Any sort of change I struggle with. I constantly am asking my family members to give me warning ahead of time if there's going to be some sort of change so that I can preemptively prepare myself, because it's a very jarring and anxiety inducing is not the right word because I can panic from it, but I had a meltdown with at least one a couple of years ago because it was such a major thing that I could not compute and I needed time away to deal with it. And it was sprung on me. So I do a lot worse when I'm not prepared for major change. And sometimes that's what it is when people are like, oh boy, I'm so excited to see this thing that I really, really like be brought to screen. And then it doesn't look like the thing that you like, but it's wearing its name. So that can be really shocking. And I don't think that there's enough grace or compassion in the conversation going either way for us to actually ever really have this conversation for real. So hopefully we can have it here. I also don't think it's necessarily helpful when, say, fans say, hey, I like this thing and I'm disappointed. The creator of the content or other people may be coming into the content or already like the content and they're fine with this new version of it, go, you're not a real fan because you're not liking this other thing. I think it's okay to say, hey, author, I like what you do, but I don't like this thing. Not even the biggest Stephen King fan doesn't love every single one of Stephen King's books. And I use him as an example because he is such a prolific author. But I don't think that it's necessarily helpful to start insulting and making accusations of people because they didn't like what they were seeing. Even with 50 Shades of Grey, there were people that didn't like the casting because that's not what they imagined for those characters. Now, going back to the question at the very top here, would I take the deal of publication for $15,000? The answer is no, because I don't think people are interchangeable. I think the characters that I make are deliberately designed to be who they are, and their demographics are part of who they are and have influenced their experience. I don't think that this is really a disputed thing until it comes to recasting characters in certain directions, and then it's all of a sudden, oh no, it's totally changeable. However, if you're talking about whether you agree with the idea or not, there's still the conversation of, hey, if a white person interacts with a cop and if a black person interacts with a cop, there's a different experience, there's a different expectation. That's what we're told. If a woman is walking down the street at night or a man is walking down the street at night, we're told that there's a different expectation, a different experience. So constantly we will see these situations described as inducing different emotions, feeling different emotions, having different experiences that build these expectations. And then at the same time, we're also told, hey, it doesn't matter if you take that white man and turn it into a woman, because their experiences and their personalities would not be different. I think that they are different. And I think the sum of our parts make up who we are. And our experiences are all affected by the sum of our parts that develop in different ways and cause people to respond to us in different ways that then create that unique experience. So I think if I were to take Joey's story, and if I were told to make her a man, or if I were told to make her a lesbian, it would completely change the story in ways that would completely change her character from her being Joey. She'd be a completely different person. So it's not so simple as a plug and play. If I were to take Ralph or Casey and change their demographics, their situations would still change. Their relationships with others would still change. And Casey is aggressive with the cops already, so there is that. So I don't think that it's just so easy as a plug and play and everybody is replaceable. There's also the argument that comes up with this constantly, where you need to watch the demographics of your story so that other people can see themselves in your stories. I'm sorry, when I'm writing a story, I'm not writing about you. I'm writing about these characters. And I would love it if you could empathize with these characters because you've got similar experiences. You understand where they're coming from, but I'm not writing you. And I think it's a narcissistic thing to open up a book and be like, where am I? I need to find myself. I need to find the character that is me and a representative of me. It's also an impossible order to write a character that represents all people of any demographic because nobody is a monolith. It's okay for authors to work with production companies or directors or artistic directors on a new version of interpreting their own stories. For me, it becomes bad when you do what Neil Gaiman did, which was insulting those fans who liked the original works but didn't want the change. I think that it's okay to either be the original reader and say, hey, I wish I could have seen something else, or hey, I wish that you would have kept closer to the storyline. For how often there's so much content on YouTube about authors behaving badly, it's never actually about stuff like this if somebody agrees with what the author is doing. It's only ever if somebody doesn't like something that the author is doing, or they perceive themselves as being on different sides. Personally, I think, and I've already said it, so this is going to be repetitive, so whatever, but I think it's fine if somebody says, hey, I wish that this would have looked like I had imagined that it would look. I'm disappointed. I'm upset. And it's okay for that person to be upset. They're not some kind of or being malicious or aggressive just because they wanted what they'd imagined or they'd seen before. And there's so little grace on the internet. There's so little grace in general. But I think what gets lost in these conversations, and I saw it and I've seen it before when I've presented stuff and people kind of either assume my position or I get a bunch of people responding to something that I've said and it seems like they're all on the same side because they're like in agreement with each other, but they're not actually the same. This happened with the generative AI stuff before and with like Shad. But it's all different people. And it's easy to forget that when it's one person receiving the comments from a bunch of different people. But it is a mistake to assume that all those that don't like the change don't like it for the same reason. It's also a mistake to go, oh, you cared that they changed X into Y, but you didn't care about this other property when they changed A into B. maybe the person is a fan of the first property, but not a fan of the second property, so they didn't know. Maybe there's also more likely an issue going on when going from a visual medium to another visual medium as opposed to a written medium to another medium, because books, despite whatever their popularity is, books are still more niche than actual movies. So the movie group is going to be more mainstream than the book readers. And a lot of book readers also create the image of the characters in their heads, regardless of what the description is in the book, if there even is a description. Sometimes there's not a description. But there are so many different things that can contribute to the imagination of how that person saw that character, or to have it change later, that it's just a mistake to say, you didn't complain about this other one, so why are you complaining about this one? And it is easily a bunch of different people. So maybe somebody complained about the Little Mermaid being changed in this new version, but didn't complain about Nick Fury being changed in the Marvel movies. Maybe there's a reason for that if it's the same person. So I think it would be helpful to actually be able to converse about these nuances and about these differences without turning it into an aggressive fight, because then we can better understand each other and we can better understand why these changes affect the people that are responding to them, or how they're affecting, instead of turning it all into either a morality beating club where one side is better than the other, when it is really just creative differences in most cases. Sometimes it's narcissism. Let's be real. At the end of the day, though, I think it does a disservice to say that you can trade any character for any other character demographic, because I don't think that people are replaceable. I wouldn't take a publishing deal that demanded that I change my characters, because they're no longer the characters that I've created. They are who they are, and part of who they are is connected to every facet of what they are, though the sum of their parts makes up who they are. An individual part does not define them, though. And I assume that's a me thing, but you can let me know what your thoughts are specifically on this in the comments below, because I don't think that I'm alone in this. I know that I'm not the only one, because am I the only one is a cliche. But I'm the kind of person that really values the individual experience of others. And I don't think that I could take Joey and make her a man or gay or trans or a different race without changing the experiences that she's had, or how she interacts with others, or how others interact with her. That goes for all of my characters. I couldn't change Karen. I couldn't change Val. I couldn't change Ralph or Casey or anybody in Dead End Drive or Jan. And somebody actually said, hey, you need to change Jan so he's not Ukrainian because of what's going on in the war. I'm sorry, I didn't choose who Jan was. Jan told me who he was, and that's just how it is. Maybe you don't write like that, and there are writers that don't write like that. That's fine. But understand that there are some writers that do. I just have to be the conduit for the characters to come to and introduce themselves to, and then show me their stories. Now, having said that, and having stated my preference, I don't hold it against authors who do make that choice to sell the character, to change the character for the money, or because of the social pressures. I just think that there needs to be more grace in the conversation, and not assume people's casts or choices are made out of malice, and don't be malicious when somebody disagrees with you about casting changes. Maybe lay off the belligerence, maybe lay off some of the belligerence of calling people not fans when the paint jobs or changes don't go over well with them. Because fundamentally, you are changing something that they really loved, and that is difficult to deal with if it's not what they expected. I know that I would be insanely disappointed in a visual version of Bodymore that didn't maintain the visuals that I have for my characters, because I see them. I want to see the world that I created come to life, and changing how any of my characters looks would change the world that I made. I think this sort of flippant action of you can replace anybody with anybody else except in these specific places actually distracts from the fact that everyone is an individual. Everyone is unique. Everyone has things that we empathize with or have gone through in different ways that we can feel from somebody else without it having to be us. And no one is replaceable, in my opinion. You can't just take one character and shove somebody else in there and it is exactly the same thing. Nothing has changed. I don't think you're replaceable. I don't think anybody else could be you, could have the experiences you have, the voice you have, the creativity, the thoughts that you have. And I think every individual is a unique person with value in their perspective. Even if I disagree, even when there are really toxic people, you know who you freaking are, evil, nobody else could replace you, because if you were replaced with somebody of a different demographic, you would be saying something different or the same thing for a different reason. What I'm saying is what you've been through is unique, and what the characters of any story have been through is also unique. So I don't think that you can just replace them and it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm overcomplicating the creative process, which is fine. This is just how I create. And if it's not how you create, that's also fine. But I've wanted to talk about recasting for a long time, and I guess right now was the time to do it. So, let me know your thoughts on the subject down below. What do you think about changing character casting, or changing demographics in your story if they do not fit you because you want to take less heat or more heat? We all know that I am constantly trying to get in trouble. Okay. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend. Vote for Bodymore the movie, please. We need the Bodymore, all of them. All 3 and 0 need a movie. They would be so good. Del Toro for director. Be so good. Let me know all of your comments and more on this subject anyway. With that said, have a great weekend. And don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?